Boa tarde, obrigado por estarem aqui. Eu vou fazer uma pequena apresentação, primeiro em português e depois vamos mudar para inglês. E gostava de começar por agradecer a todas as pessoas envolvidas e instituições também que fazem com que possamos estar aqui hoje a conversar com o Yves Citton, ao museu que nos acolhe, à Braga Media Arts e ao convite também do Luís e da Joel da parte da Bienal Index, que me permite religar, não é, com um projeto no qual eu estive também envolvida nas primeiras edições, e é muito bom chegar aqui e ver que sente-se que está a crescer, não é? E isso é muito bom ver isso. Nós hoje estamos então no primeiro momento de debate, na primeira conferência, e eu vou só fazer uma breve apresentação, depois vou começar aqui uma conversa deste lado que vamos querer que se estenda para esse lado. Portanto, a certa altura aqui esta quarta parede desaparece mesmo e eu sei que o Yves Citton, que também percebe um pouco de português, mas portanto está a ouvir, está a perceber aquilo que eu estou a dizer, eu sei que ele tem vontade também deste envolvimento convosco, portanto sintam-se depois à vontade para participar na conversa. Já sabem, mas vou só relembrar que o tema de hoje e deste momento é Infraestruturas do Poder. O Yves tem trabalhado muito sobre como é que os mídia, como é que a tecnologia constrói, dá forma à realidade que nós vivemos, e ultimamente tem desenvolvido também este trabalho a partir deste conceito, desta ideia de infraestrutura. O que é que são estas infraestruturas e como é que elas... neste pensamento de relação com a tecnologia, com os mídias, como é que elas estão a informar e a formar também a nossa realidade. Mas sobre isso ele já irá falar mais um pouco. O professor Yves Citton é professor de Literatura e Mídia na Universidade de Paris 8 em Vincennes-Saint-Denis. É membro também do Instituto Universitário de França e co-editor da revista Multitudes. Por acaso não conhecem esta revista? Uma revista francesa também de pensamento crítico. Sugiro-vos que procurem online, é uma revista que está disponível online. Tem várias publicações, publicações como, por exemplo, em 2024, Políticas da Curiosidade, Alternativas a uma Economia da Atenção. Eu estou a traduzir um título em inglês, porque ela não está traduzido para português, este livro, mas dou este exemplo porque a questão da atenção é também algo que é um tema muito também trabalhado pelo Yves Citton, não é? E também como é que os mídia também nos manuseiam aqui a atenção, não é? E a atenção que nós temos de ter a isso, não é? A capacidade de discernimento que nós temos de ter em relação a isso. Uma outra publicação, 2025, Mitocracia, como é que as histórias dão forma aos nossos mundos. E vou só, enfim, há mais outro livro, A Ecologia da Atenção. Se calhar a palavra ecologia vai surgir aqui nesta conversa também, mais um pouco. Vou só chamar a atenção para duas publicações. Hoje de manhã houve uma conversa na livraria Almedina, aqui em Braga, a partir deste livro. Foi uma conversa entre o António Guerreiro e o Yves Citton, e este livro foi traduzido para português e foi publicado este ano, e chama-se A Máquina de Fazer Ganhar Direitas. Eu vou só ler aqui uma frase, só para perceberem um bocadinho rapidamente. O que faz a direita ganhar é um certo estado das nossas formas e infraestruturas mediáticas, cujo metabolismo liga diretamente os seus discursos e imaginários às nossas dinâmicas emocionais. Vemos aqui toda uma articulação entre emoção, imaginários, discurso e infraestruturas mediáticas, que é aquilo sobre o qual iremos falar. Também esta revista, Eletra, o número desta primavera, portanto esta é a última edição desta revista, tem todo um dossiê dedicado à questão das infraestruturas. E o Yves Citton também tem aqui um artigo também sobre este tema. Portanto, deixo só esta sugestão para, se quiserem, se por acaso ainda não tiveram a oportunidade, mas se quiserem depois estender também o diálogo em casa com o que vai acontecer aqui, ficam com estas sugestões que estão também aqui à mão. So, I will change now to
Great.
English, just to
Okay.
give the word to you, and then we come back. Thank
All
you
right.
for coming.
Thank you very much. Continue your thanking for the Index people who invited me, for the museum, this wonderful place, for you to be here, and for you to take some of your time on Saturday afternoon. I will try not to speak too quickly, so that I hope it will be easy to understand what I say. I apologize for not speaking Portuguese. I think I can understand roughly, but I cannot speak, and I'm a little ashamed, but I hope you'll forgive me. We said we talk about 25 minutes first, and then we'll have a conversation, and then we'll open it to you. So in 20 minutes, obviously it's difficult to talk about power and infrastructure, but I want to do just a few simple things. And the first one is maybe to start not from power, but from inability or disability. And I want to start just from this situation that to me is worrying me very much. And whatever I do, I end up going back to this. I would phrase it this way. We don't seem to have the power to address the most important questions of our time. So I'm starting from the power we don't have. It seems to me, maybe you show me where this power is and everything will be solved and I will be very happy. But my feeling is that there's a power we lack, and it seems to be not so impossible to reach, just to address collectively the most important questions of our time. So we could say, is it the power to solve these problems? I think clearly we don't have them. Is it the power to identify important problems of our times? I think we're getting closer. One thing to me which seems very worrying is that we don't seem to have the power to reach a consensus on what these problems are and what could be done about it. So I will start from this inability. And maybe in order to advance a little bit, I will break the notion of power into two different notions. And I think I know in French it works, in Latin it works, I think in Portuguese also. Maybe I'll go through the Latin words. When we say power in English, it can be either potentia in Latin or potestas in Latin. And so I guess poder and potentia, same thing. Potent, okay, fine. And so in English, this is all power. And I think it's very important to discriminate them. So potestas, or poder, I guess, in Portuguese, you think of institutions, you think of hierarchies, you think of somebody commanding somebody else to do something, and that's one side of power. I'm more interested in the other one, in potentia, which would be just ability. I started by saying, let's start from disability or inability. Well, potentia is precisely about that. What do I have the power to do? So for instance, I can stand up. I can walk, I can turn around, I can jump. So this is already a power. It seems obvious for most of us. If we just think that some people maybe are in wheelchairs, or some people maybe their eyes are not working or something. So there are a lot of humans where this power to do something as simple as standing up and jumping, it's not a given. And let's keep them in mind, because I think if we start thinking about power from disability, maybe we're in a better position. Now, my body can jump, but my body cannot fly. Neither, I guess, yours. And yet, yesterday, I came from Paris to Porto, and I flew. So this was another form of potentia, which is not my singular power as an individual, but a collective power that history, technology, politics, economy, etc., gave ourselves. Now we can fly across nation, across continent, etc., etc. So again, here we're in the potentia type of power. If I was black-skinned, oops, sorry, I shouldn't touch that. And if I was coming from Africa, I couldn't just fly to Porto. We have the technology as humans, but then there are things like passports and rights and migration rights, etc., etc. And then potestas will come in the way of what we can do, of the potentia that we have to fly or not to fly. Now, we understand that what allowed me to come from Paris to Porto in an airplane is what we call infrastructures. So I guess for most of us, we have a clear intuition of what an infrastructure is. Let's say it's human-built system. It's not just natural, it's human-built. Let's say it has material substrates, railroads. I mean, the history of the word infrastructure came from railroads. It was in around 1840, I think, or 1850, where I would say engineer, maybe I'll correct that later on, made a difference between the railroads themselves, the track, and what was running on the tracks, the wagon, the locomotives, and so forth. So above was superstructure, and under was infrastructure, the rails. But also, these infrastructure, so they provide services, they provide basic services, services that we consider as basic, like flying from Porto to Paris, which, as a matter of fact, are not basic at all. They're very elaborate, but we get either, you can say, addicted, or we get used to, or we get habits of using these services. Now, so I guess we all know what infrastructure is, something that adds to our individual potentia, to our individual power as potentia. Now, I'm quite interested in a circle of philosophers in France who published a number of books under the collective names of Le Comité Invisible, the Invisible Committee. Maybe some of you are familiar with it. It's sort of, and one of their main theses in 2010, more or less, was to say that now politics, the political, has to be located in the infrastructural. So politics is not so much this person saying this thing and being elected. I mean, this obviously is important, but something which is much more important, which conditions politics. It's what type of, again, infrastructure is being built, is being neglected, is working, is not working. And they say more and more what determines, what conditions our life. It's not, I mean, it is partly, clearly, decisions made by somebody elected, but they talked about the technical configuration of worlds, and the technical configuration of worlds, the capacity to take a train, the ability to take a plane, the fact that power in terms of electricity comes to our house, etc. This is really what conditions our age and our politics. Now I'm going to move on to think about a word in English which can be used as an equivalent to infrastructures. And to me, it's an interesting word, at least in French. I hope it works the same in Portuguese. It's facility. When in English you say, oh, it's a facility, it could be a swimming pool is a facility, because artificially you build water and you can swim, etc., etc. So facility. Now, I guess in Portuguese the same. In French, facility is facile. Facile. And facile means easy. It worked in Portuguese?
Sim, facilidades.
Facilidades.
Sim, sim.
Cool, okay. But I guess, well, whatever. So I think we started by talking about power, by talking about infrastructures. If infrastructure are facilities, I want to switch, or I want to move to the notion of what's easy and what's not so easy. So when I said earlier as something obvious that I can fly, which is true, and that therefore I took a plane, my body, which can stand up and walk around, I could have walked from Paris to Porto. Or I could have taken a bike. I have the power, I have the potentia to take a bike and come from Paris to Porto. It's possible. It's just slow. It's difficult. I don't know if my physical capacity would do it, but I guess I could have. It's just not that easy. And if we think of powers or infrastructures of power, not just in terms of the possible, what's possible or what's not possible, but what's easy as opposed to what's possible but not so easy, I think it can change a number of things. And in particular, I don't know if you meditated and read and memorized the program of the Index Festival, but in the Index Festival, you have a quote by a Spanish philosopher, Marina Garcés, who talks about the prison of the possible. The prison of the possible. And I was very struck by this, I like this philosopher, even if I don't remember her name. And I think that this expression is very strong. What does it mean, the prison of the possible? And how can we rethink infrastructure in terms of prisons of the possible? And I would say at least three things. Well, what we consider possible imprisons us. It's like a jail, because we don't think that other things are possible, whereas, as a matter of fact, other things would be possible. I could have come from Paris to Porto on my bike. It's possible. Nobody says it's impossible. So first notion of the prison of the possible, it's to limit the possible to the easy. It wouldn't be easy to take my bike, but it's possible. Another meaning, I think, of the prison of the possible is to sort of understate difficulty. When I said earlier, we don't seem to have the power to reach a consensus about what is our main problems. It seems easy. We should just talk. I mean, there are certain things. Why don't we decrease our emission of carbon dioxide gas? I mean, we sort of know how to do it. It's possible. And yet we don't do it. So we think it's possible, but actually no. So there's something we don't identify as an impossibility, as a disability, because obviously, I guess, most of us, even maybe people who vote for Trump or something, they see that forest burn and they see that there are more flooding and they're not happy with that. So if you could tell them, guys, let's do something about it, I guess they would. So it is possible, and yet we can't reach it. So there's another way to think of the possible of the prison. It seems possible, but there are bars, just like in a prison, and we can't reach what we want to do. But there's a third meaning of the prison of the possible, and maybe I could frame it this way, like the golden prison of easiness. The golden prison of easiness. And I think that's a lot of what infrastructures do to us. Because it's easy to take a plane from Paris to Porto, I take a plane from Paris to Porto. I know that taking planes nowadays is not such a good idea, etc. We should think twice, etc. So I try not to take planes too often, but I do it. And it's not my fault if the climate is overheating, but we know there's a number of things we should do or we should not do, and we keep doing them because it's not only possible, but easy. So there's a word, I think, that a French philosopher of mine in France forged for or created for this, to think about these infrastructures which make our life easier, which is good. That's what infrastructure are supposed to do. They're facilities. But then have consequences that we don't like, we shouldn't like, and we should try to avoid. It's Alexandre Monin, M-O-N-N-I-N. He's a good friend of Nicolas Maigret, who came here, I think, last week. They worked together. They did a lot of things together. This book, The Bestiary of the Anthropocene, you find a good article by Alexandre Monin on what he calls negative commons. And I think this notion of negative commons is very, very interesting. What does he mean by that? He means infrastructures that are both a common asset, nuclear power plants, airport, airlines, etc., etc. These are things that, even if it's owned by a private company, it's a common asset that makes our life easier in general. It's also a common problem. If you think of nuclear waste, even if one company is in charge of nuclear waste now, this company can go bankrupt, and it's our common problem to do something with nuclear waste. So negative commons are commons, just like air, water, language, all these things. But we have to deal with them as something toxic, as something that raises problems, as something that we should be aware of. And so Alexandre Monin and his friends, they developed what they call an ecology of dismantlement. Dismantlement. These negative comments, you can't just say, oh, I don't like nuclear power plants, we're just going to explode them, or we're going to bury them. No, it's not easy. You have to do a lot of careful maintenance, careful dismantlement for a nuclear power plant, or one could say another example, or many other examples of negative comments, one of them could be agrobusiness. Agrobusiness is what feeds most of us, and it nourishes us, if you want, but it makes a lot of our land perish. So it nourishes and it perishes. Something perishes because of, we know, all the consequences of the way now agriculture and agrobusiness is sort of destroying the fertility of the land or species, etc., etc. So an ecology of dismantlement is to think of infrastructure both as something that makes our life either possible or easier, and this is good, of our addiction to certain forms of easiness, and of the difficulty of trying to separate what we really need, what really it would be impossible to live with, and what's just easy and maybe we could do without that. And putting the balance here, I think it's, to me, one of the problems of infrastructure and our disability, as far as I understand it, in 2026 to confront the problems, the ecological problems, but also the social problems with which I don't talk too much. So I just have 5 more minutes, and I would go now from our disabilities to maybe what do we have the power to do? And I will say just 4 things on what I think we have the power to do to address these questions of the power of infrastructures. And in all of these 4 points, in a way, I will invite you to modify, to amend our conception of what an infrastructure is or of what power is. So the first one maybe would be targeted on finance. I think a lot of us know that finance is sort of a mega something that we don't really understand, but that decides on everything. Thinking of finance as sort of an infrastructure of infrastructures, I think would be helpful and would show how crucial it is for all of us to become much more literate on what finance is and to address by different means. Just before lunch, we're talking about peaceful means or non-peaceful or violent or non-violent. I think the power, if we take back that word, the potestas of finance over our world development is so worrying that any means necessary would be justified to try to attack and to try to dismantle it precisely. So just identify finance. Let's just learn more about finance. Let's remember also what I said earlier about the very notion of infrastructure, that when I said, when they started the railroad in the 1850s, they decided tracks, railroad would be infrastructure, and wagon would be superstructure. This is not engineers who made the distinction. I was always thinking, infrastructure, superstructure, it's a matter of engineering, of technical issue. No, they all go together. It was from the financial point of view, from the people who were financing railroads, that it made a lot of difference to invest in the railroad track, to invest in the people who travel on it, the workers, and so forth. So infrastructure, the very notion of it, has been selected, has been created, if you want, by financial preoccupation. We need to understand much better and to act on what made infrastructure possible, and what makes infrastructure possible is the financial system. And maybe I started by saying, and I will just say right now, that we should start from our disabilities. I started, if you remember, from the fact that we don't have the power to address the most important problem of our times. When we don't know, when we can't really identify something, what we can do is speculate about it. And I think one of the strong power of finance that we have to better understand is it's a form of speculation. We all know that. But what is speculation? What do you do when you speculate? And maybe we'll leave that for the discussion. I think we should think about it much more carefully. And there's a Greek philosopher who, Athanasiou, I forgot his name, who wrote a fantastic book on speculative communities, saying that, or he doesn't say it this way, but I would translate it this way, saying that we think of modernity as producing homo economicus. We are calculating individuals who invest things and wait for return on investment. And the example of that would be the entrepreneur, somebody who has to run, to manage a factory, to manage something. And I think that's our ideal of, our ideal we criticize of capitalism, of modernity, etc., etc. What he suggests is that we are moving to homo speculativus. A lot of young people are used because of games, because of video games, because of just the uncertainty of their life, just to speculate, just to bet on things. And I think you can read what's happening in the United States with Trump. You can read what's been happening with the Brexit in England, etc. As people not knowing that they don't know, and just accepting that speculating, even on probably stupid things, but we have to speculate, we have to take risks. What we know is not enough. We are disabled in that manner. So let's just speculate. Oh, maybe Trump is not that bad, or maybe Brexit will bring something. And I think to understand how finance has invaded, and the speculative mode has invaded a lot of our political sphere, to me, is a good starting point to maybe understand things differently. And the starting point, I won't go more on that. That would be my second point. It starts with disability. It starts not with the power we have, with what we know how to do, but with the fact that we are, in a way, disabled. And especially, we talked about media, and that'll be my next point. Our attention, our individual attention, is not up to the task, to what we would need to read, to see, to learn, to say, in order to address these problems. And so let's start from our attentional deficit, not just a personal attentional deficit and I take Ritalin and then I'm cured. I think Ritalin may be necessary in certain cases. I'm not saying, I'm not dogmatic about it. But let's see that it's part of a much bigger problem of collective attentional deficit. And let's just start from this. Not that there are certain people who have problems. We all have a problem. And how do we address this problem? Maybe we can go back to that in the question. And one of the ways to address it is precisely to think about media. Because we cannot be attentive to the world. We pay attention to our friends, to what's here, to what we see around us. Most of what we know and most of what matters to us is remote. We don't have access to it with our senses. So we need infrastructure. We need a media infrastructure to communicate images, stories, news, etc. And our attentional deficit is not just, again, a personal thing, not just collective things, it's an infrastructural thing, that this current media infrastructure doesn't allow us to address this problem. And the last point I will make, sorry, I'm too long, so I will be very, very short on this one. I talked about, very briefly, on infrastructures and media. More and more, I'm interested in philosophers who address something that's even before we enter technology and media. And they call it atmosphere or ambiance. And now I'm reading a French psychotherapist in the institutional psychotherapy movement. People like Félix Guattari, maybe you've heard of him, or Jean Houry, or Francesc Tosquelles, coming from Catalonia. And these people had as their task to go into a mental hospital and not to accept that in mental hospital people are locked up. To say, oh yeah, maybe we probably need mental hospital because people face anxieties and suffering and they need to be helped, they need to be cured. But the way we would do it in the 50s, so they came just after World War II, was to lock them up or to tie them up if there were violence. And the premise of this movement was to say, we can't lock them up. So we have to find a way to cohabitate with insane people, with mentally disabled people. We're people who don't think like us, who don't see the world like us. And this movement gave birth to a thinking about institution, about establishment, about how to cohabitate together and to share a space, which I think is the most useful way to address our problems in our current situation. Let's just think we all live in a mental hospital, that we have to take care for each other because there's no other doctors than ourselves towards each other. Let's assume that we're all crazy, and then let's start to talk. And if this is the situation, then the most important thing is not so much what we know, it's not so much what we don't know, it's not so much the infrastructure in terms of cables and artificial intelligence, it's just the ambience that we manage or fail to create to feel like we can talk to each other with our insanities, with our disabilities. And to me, that's the most maybe important thing to answer this question. And now it will be the moment to talk. And if you want to start.
Yes, okay, thank you. I was listening to you and I have several points that perhaps I can start with. One, it's this word that somehow that permeates all your intervention, that it's the word disability, that perhaps I would like to go back to that word, because it's something that sometimes we see it in a kind of negative way, but you are proposing in these different points of what we have the power to do, and somehow you are thinking also these disabilities as a kind of power. It makes me think about also another space of work that it comes from creep theory.
Exactly.
So creep, it's this thought where what we thought that it's, well, what is outside normality, what is outside even, it's a field of research and of thought and of experience and of activism, of people that came from people with disabilities, so in the field of disability studies. And this word creep used to be a word that was very, with a very negative charge. It's a little bit like negritude, that was taken in a more political, also emancipatory way. So I would like to know if you can relate a little bit with this transformation, perhaps I was thinking perhaps even taking away these norms that we have in order to do something. Perhaps we need to do a movement,
right,
that it's away from what we consider reality, or what we consider normality, what we consider...
Or, again, or possible, impossible, or power, impossible, or infrastructure.
Yes.
Yeah, very much. So let me just do a brief detour. I am about 63, 64. I was, for a very long time, I've been sensitive to issues of gender, to issues of race, to try not to be too racist, to try not to be too masculinist, etc. And it's not easy because we have habits and we have to treat that. And it's, I don't pretend I'm not racist. I think I have racist pulsion and reaction and habits. So trying to work on ourselves. And only very recently did I realize how ableist, I don't know if you're familiar with that word in English, I don't know how it would translate into Portuguese, but validism or ableism is just to assume that because you have a body that works normally, you see, you hear, you walk, you have all that, you just assume that this is the way to go and that handicapped people have something missing. I mean, they're sort of under you, not in terms of value, because we're all about it, but, well, they have something missing. And they have something missing because it's a form of sickness, or it's a form, okay, they had something in their brain, or they had something, or whatever. And this, to me, seemed obvious, and I never really questioned it. And now, more and more, I'm discovering how it's just as important as racism. It's just as important as gender. And maybe 100 years ago, 200 years ago, issues of gender would, I mean, they were there because there were proto-feminists who were fighting, but they were sort of unseen. Just like I think we realize more and more what colonialism and racism does, and I think we haven't started to understand that something just as big, which is taken by its disability studies, does that. So that would be the first thing. And so just very briefly on this, you have at least two major ways to address issues of handicap. One is called sort of the medical theory, which is precisely to say, oh, it's a matter of bodies, and some bodies have problems. It's not their fault, obviously, but they have problems. I mean, the nerves don't work or whatever. So that's the medical theory, and obviously it's true. But there's a social theory also of disability, which is to say that, why do we have to have stairs to go places? We could just have ramps. And in fact, if we change a stair for a ramp, it will, people who are unable to go to a place, they will be able to go to a place just by changing a stair by a ramp. So yes, there is a matter of medication and body, and there's suffering and there's all this, but a lot of it is socially constructed. The inability to do things is socially constructed. And I think now, I just mentioned attention earlier. Why is there such a rise in attention deficit disorder, ADHD, I don't know how you say it in Portuguese, but, and we see, oh, more and more people have that. Many reasons, I don't pretend I have the answer, but I think also because it's like we put stairways everywhere in order to do everything, and if you're not very fit attentionally to do all these things, well, you consider as handicapped.
Yes.
You have an attentional deficit. But let's think about what we expect people, what is normal to expect from human bodies and societies to do. So, and then I think there's a third way to go. So medical theory, medical approach, social approach. And then the social approach itself is not satisfactory because it's as if well, it's just we're all equal, and some people need ramp, and some people need stairways. No, some people with disabilities suffer, just pain, just suffering, not just incapacity to do something with suffering. And I think if you take that into account, then disability becomes something I think much more politically interesting, and that's what CRIP study, and CRIP RIP for cripple. Cripple means estropié. I don't know what it would be in Spanish, in Portuguese. Yeah.
Sí.
So again, it's returning the stigma. And I think CRIP study is both. Yes, there is a part of medicine. Yes, there is a part of social. And yes, there is a part of just perception of pain that needs to be addressed as pain, not as just dysfunctioning, not as just a medical problem, but as pain. And so I'm concluding on this. I think starting from the point of view of disabled people on any issue that we would have makes us see two things. First, that in a way we're all partly disabled. I mean, I'm getting old. My ears are not functioning as well. I can't jump the stairs as I used to jump the stairs, so I'm becoming disabled, and that's exactly what aging is, in part. We're always disabled compared to certain expectations. Yes. That's what I was saying with attention, et cetera, et cetera. And yet, I don't pretend I'm disabled because I don't have the type of anxiety and the type of just suffering that a lot of people, unfortunately, have with their mind, with their members, et cetera, et cetera. So, to me, taking that point of view raises more interesting questions.
And it seems also a fruitful way of placing ourselves in order to address this golden prison of easiness, because when we start by this position where we have also, all of us are in a position of deficit, we are starting from a place of difficulty. So
Exactly.
it can be quite a creative also way of going away from this this golden prison of easiness. It kind of demands. It's a demanding, but also a fruitful place for imaginaries, but also for action, political action, and social, and even reinventing or redesigning these human-built systems that are the infraestructures that you mentioned. So.
And again, maybe in starting humbly with our potentia, what can we do? I said, I can stand up because I'm lucky. What we cannot do, disability, and just start from that. Because world issues, I started by saying, oh, we can face these. They're so complicated. Of course, none of us can understand, less solve them. But let's start from the limitation of what we cannot do. We're all a little bit disabled. Let's start from the pain, the anxieties that we have, and acknowledge them and share them, and start with a discussion on this, a discussion where precisely ambiance, just like in a mental hospital, ambiance is very important. So let's try to work on ourselves just to hear kindly what people will say, which may not please us, which we may think as an accusation of who we are, of what we do, but let's try to open that space. And this is not easy, but it's possible. And then from what we can do with our bodies, with our communities, with our collective potentia, then I think we can rebuild something from there. And often, because we're obsessed with climate change, we're obsessed with racism, we're obsessed with things like that remain very, very abstract, or crime, or whatever, or drug traffic, or whatever. This, in a way, it's a distraction in the sense that it wastes our attention on things where we are powerless, if we're talking about power infrastructure. So the power of infrastructure, I think, should start from these very basic structures of our communicating with each other, or sharing of what we can, we can't, what we feel, what we suffer, etc., and rebuild from that. And I think another part of the program of Index you had, is there power in dialogue? At least that was the English translation. And to me, that would be the crux of it. Yes, there is power in dialogue, which means that it's not only the same guy who should speak all the time and that we should share, because this is not a dialogue, this is just a monologue. So it's the opposite. That's potestas. That's precisely potestas in its worst form. So maybe I should shut up and listen to how you would react and object or...
Perhaps I'll have, just connecting to this idea of dialogue, I'll just have one more question before moving to this other side. So please start to prepare your comments and questions. And that is, you speak about dialogue. And when I listen you about this negative commons, this idea, Alexander Mona. Negative commons, I kept thinking about something that I'd like to understand a little bit more, why to call this a common. Because something that, for me, it's important in the notion of commons, and I'm referring, for instance, to the work of Pierre Dardot, Christian Laval, to French thinkers who worked a lot on this. It's the idea of co-responsibility. And there, the process of dialogue and of... it's something that more than dialogue. So it's mostly the idea of co-responsibility, also to address the redesign of human-built systems, so of infrastructures. So how do you...
So thank you, because I went very quickly on a lot of things when I spoke earlier. And the notion of the commons is a very, obvious one in a way, and a very complicated one once you dig under the surface. So there's one way to say, the air is common. Water, it shouldn't be appropriated by a company who then sells water. So water should be it is a common good, which is both intuitive and I think a little too simple, because usually when we talk about the commons, we think about common management of a resource, not just the resource itself, but either a private management of it, market laws, et cetera, or a common management, which can be very complicated or whatever. So what are negative commons, not just in terms of water, of nuclear waste, but in terms of the institution, the agreement, the mode of dealing with these type of things. And this, I think what we see, again, whichever example, people can give their own examples, but I think what we have is, for instance, I was talking about the agro business, the agro industry. Well, food is not exactly common because it's produced. It's not like water that would be there. Are the land, is the land common? That's a very traditional thing to say the land is common, but it's not just the land, it's the land in how we manage it.
Yes.
And I think here what we have is a system where a few people are in a position not even to decide, I mean, I'm talking about big farmers, they don't really decide every morning, oh, am I going to go organic or am I going to stay with chemistry and so forth? What is best, etc.? Is it my problem? Is it our common problem? Individuals are caught in machines, just like we were saying earlier.
In the line of the train.
Right, in form of assembly lines, where in terms of responsibility or co-responsibility, precisely the result of this infrastructure, this mega machine, this mega infrastructure of industrial food production de-responsibilizes the individual or the communities who are working within it. And I think, again, starting from what we can or what we cannot do, and maybe that farmer who is indebted, heavily indebted, maybe he can just say, oh, now I'm going to stop using these things because it's not cool for animals. No, he can't.
Yes.
And that's why we need this moment of thinking about what's easy, what's uneasy. Maybe, I don't think we can, in a few years, just change altogether the agribusiness. This is not feasible. But a lot of things could be easy or not. I'm going to ask you a question. I don't eat meat. I haven't eaten meat or animals for the last 40 years, and I survive. It's easy not to eat beef or chicken.
Yes.
Is it desirable? It's to be discussed. I never say, oh, I'm a vegetarian, I'm pure, you're all criminals, or you're accomplice to the agro-business or whatever. No, we decide, we do our best, etc., etc. I think certain things look like it's a big commitment or it would be a big change. And I think eating much less meat, I'm not talking about stopping altogether, but eating much less meat, I think it would be very easy. And everybody says that would be one of the most important things to reduce these phenomenon, these tendencies that we don't like. So again, the prison of the possible, the prison of the easy. And so, just to go back to your question, negative commons and responsibility, I think that agrobusiness can be seen as a negative. It's a way of managing resources, water, land, biodiversity, and all that. It is. It's not just a given. It's a common way. But it's a common way which precisely de-responsibilizes the consumer, the producer, the financer.
Yes.
And this is where the problem. That's why it's negative.
Yes.
Common. Because, I mean, not because it's bad to do this, but because the consequences are unsustainable.
Yes. And that takes away the responsibility in a larger ecological picture somehow.
Right.
And another question before, because thinking about ecology, here when you mentioned what we have the power to do, you spoke about finance, and you call finance the infrastructure of infrastructures. And in another text, you also mentioned that ecology is somehow also a base, an infrastructure of base.
Oh, right.
So I was doing this.
That's a good
ecology.
point. Sorry, and then we open the.
Okay, then we'll open.
When I said infrastructure, what I had in mind is that it would be, it's a matter of supra or infra, which is, so when you say the ecology, the surround, milieu, etc., this is clearly the base upon which productive systems are built. So this would be base and then there. When I meant infrastructure, I was more saying of something from above that conditions and determines where we're going to invest money, where we don't. And the best case for that is artificial intelligence. What we're witnessing for the last 5 years is just this crazy thing from the top of people who collect savings and investment, redirect it towards the hope of a very remote form of profit in artificial intelligence. And as you know, billions and billions and billions are directed there, and I have nothing against artificial intelligence. I think it can be great, can do great things or dangerous things. That's not even the issue. The issue is this is not going to solve the problem. I started with that. I think there's one thing for sure, is that it's not artificial intelligence that's going to solve our problem. We're going to solve them by talking to each other or by killing each other. I don't know. We have a choice. And the fact is now that because of this negative common of finance, billions and billions and billions and billions, I should add, are directed towards this, which is interesting, but clearly not the priority. So it's sort of superstructure of the superstructure, but in the sense of the super determines the infrastructure. And that's why this text here, I call it the great upset, to show that what we thought we knew, especially if we were Marxists, that, the base means of production, this is infrastructure, and then the laws, culture, art, literature, this is superstructures. And I think I called it the great upset because I think that it's constantly changing this way.
Okay, thank you. So we have a microphone for your sharings, questions, comments. Please just, yes, there's one there.
Thank you, Yves and Liliana. I was wondering, in your works, previous works like Mediarchis, you mentioned obviously the influence of media or how media is shaped to shape our reality. And this also reminded me of Stigler's tertiary retention, which basically it means that technology is a means of externalization of memory. Which obviously all of ourselves have been dealing with over the last few years. And this is quite problematic since all the platforms that we use regularly, like our email, our social networks, social media, the media itself, is shaping not only the present, but also a kind of a legacy that we cannot have any means of control with. So I would like you to comment on that, and also in like a comment. I think your presentation today has a lot of similarities in a good way, or aligns with what Benjamin Bratton calls a stack, or that the way that we live in a multi-layered reality, where almost like a computational approach to what reality is, that we don't have the power to interfere with, or maybe we have, and we don't know how to do it. Thank you.
Thank you. Maybe I'll start with Stigler's tertiary retention, just so to make it hopefully accessible to everyone. Bernard Stiegler, a French philosopher who died unfortunately a few years ago, was taking over from Husserl and from phenomenology in philosophy this notion of retention. And primary retention is what you're keeping now, what you're taking from what I'm saying. So in present, no, there's no noise. This place is perfect. Usually there's always some wind, something, or whatever here. Because usually when I explain that, I say, you didn't pay attention and heard that there was a very heavy air conditioning system. Well, here it's perfect, so there's no, but you wouldn't have noticed anyway. So this is primary retention. Secondary retention, you keep memories. So you're going to walk out of here, and maybe you'll remember one word, 2 words, a stupid thing I said, etc., etc. Secondary retention. Tertiary retention, I guess somebody there maybe has a camera or a recorder working, and these are the tertiary retention, recordings of things that happen. I think it's very important to think of quaternary. Stigler doesn't talk about that, but to talk about, first I will say quaternary retention, and then I'll correct that. What would be quaternary retention? To understand the world we live in now. Whatever is recorded and whatever circulates among us, mostly on digital network, is treated as data and is loaded with metadata to inform mostly the owners and the managers of platforms in order to have information on us, on how to advertise this thing rather than that thing, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a whole other level, which is the attentional information, the attentional data that are linked to whatever tertiary retention that circulate among us. And this was the case until maybe 5-6 years ago. I was talking about quaternary retentions. And that changes a lot of things because how these tertiary retentions circulate, well, it depends on the quaternary, the attentional data that we think is going to be attractive or it's going to be... Now with the development of generative AI, I think it's get even more complicated. Because a lot of what circulates among us are not retentions at all. It's not recordings. It's a recombination, a statistical recombination of what circulates among us based on this quaternary retention because it circulates because of the attention, etc. But it's not retention. So with a friend of mine, we did a whole book on this, and we call them quaternary distensions. Not retention, but distension, because there's still something that are tended, but it's not just retake something that was recorded. It morphs it. It changes its shape. It can do deep fake, etc., etc. So in this world of quaternary distension, yes, it is a stack with a lot of layers, and trying to analyze these different layers. And to see that the new layer doesn't cancel the previous one. It just reconfigures the previous one. So television still exists, and television is very powerful. And if Trump is who he is, it's because of television, because he was a television star. So to think of how the newly arrived layer reconfigures all the others, this is very complicated. This is the challenge. But I think a lot of people, I mean, you had Mackenzie Walk here last week. That's precisely the type of thing that she really helps us understand. And Matteo Pasquinelli and a lot of other folks. Yeah.
So there's one upstairs, yes, there.
There's a good article of Matteo Pasquinelli in Electra, if you're interested, that addresses specifically this issue.
Thank you for a very inspiring conversation. Maybe if I'm using words that are very similar to your meaning, but it would seem to me that at the more basic level from power, there is the notion of will. And maybe they are too similar for in your vocabulary that I should stop here, but if not, it seems to me that a lot of the dialogue we need to have is to align the understanding about whether we have the same type of will or not. And power and dialogues being one of the mechanisms for power, maybe that's the kind of thing we need to implement, stimulate, foster more in our societies and our communities.
Well, thank you so much. Yeah, that is so important. You use the word will, which to me, and I guess to most of us, makes a lot of sense, because intuitively we know that we will certain things or not, so that's quite accessible to all of us. I think if we try to either over-intellectualize it or try to be more rigorous about the categories with which we classify things, it becomes a little muddier when you have these other notions that could be linked to that, which is at least the notion of desire and the notion of pulsion or drive. Drive, I don't know how it is in English. Drive in English, in Portuguese, in French, c'est pulsion. Les pulsions maybe in Portuguese also.
Pulsão para.
Yeah, pulsão, right.
Sim, sim.
And so all of these two things are part of the will. Why do I will to do this rather than to do that? You could say, oh, it's my desire. And what is your desire? Well, from about a century on, we think, oh, there's a guy Freud, there's a guy Lacan, there's a lot of people, psychoanalysis tell us, oh, well, maybe we don't know really what we will. We have a desire. These desires are unconscious. Sometimes they're contradictory with each other. So what is our will compared to these desires? And now more and more, it seems, with the development of neurosciences, et cetera, desire itself is like will. Oh, it's too complicated. There's too many things happening there. So we're going to talk about pulsion, drives, or pulsion in English, I think, also. With the idea, oh, we could see in the brain what you show that photo, you do, and you can see connections and transmitters, and that just drives you to do this. Which then becomes very muddy because precisely a drive pushes you to do something which maybe you don't really want. I mean, I'm diabetic. I have a drive to drink sugar. I want sugar, and sometimes I just eat sugar because I like sugar. Do I will to eat sugar? No, I don't want sugar. I don't want it. It's not good for me. I know it's not good for me. So I think this category of the will, we should be very, again, we should hear it, and we should see precisely that humans have will. Artificial intelligence, whatever we call it, large language models, etc., they don't have will, and that makes a whole lot of difference. And the problem, the collective problems that we have are problems of willing entities and not computers, granted. And yet, I think we cannot not analyze what we consider to be our will and to see that it's very, very complicated with drives, with desires, with unconscious desires, with et cetera, et cetera. So, but remember, I finished my talk and I didn't have enough time to develop it on psychoanalysis and institutional psychotherapy. Precisely, when you see yourselves as living in a mental asylum with other more or less insane people, and maybe the most insane are those who believe they're doctors. And that's exactly what Dury and all these people said, is that they distinguish between role, function, and status. Status is you are here as a doctor or you are here as a patient. Function is you help people, you do the cooking, or you clean the bathroom, or you give pills. And in their institutions, well, they had patients cooking, or they had patients listening to other patients and helping each other. So the functions were, and roles are different. But so they kept saying the most dangerous people in a mental institutions are those who come here with a diploma, identify with the stages of doctors, and consider themselves above the other. They don't realize considering yourself as a doctor is a form of insanity. And this would be the premise to be able to cohabitate in a mental asylum, did they say. So that's why the idea that we could control our will, I think either we all know that it's not the case, or those who know among us, I think they may be the most dangerous. I don't know. I'd like to continue the discussion with you afterward, because it would be great if you didn't agree with me. But
perhaps I would like to add something to this conversation. That is, I know that the idea of consensus is also something important for you. So I was thinking about this relationship between will and consensus, and today you in the conversation. So I follow your conversation in Almedina a little bit because I didn't start it from the beginning, but you mentioned this concept of égale liberté. That somehow, because this connection between will and consensus can be also dangerous, because it's like how to create a common will, and it can give it can have political derivations that are very dangerous and fascist.
Absolutely.
So how to connect these two dimensions and perhaps this égale liberté, and perhaps you can explain a little bit what it is. It can create this attention to will. Sometimes it's an individual drive, so it comes also from a singularity. But in order to change infrastructures, we need some commonality. So this thing that we can, where we can speak about consensus. So can you speak a little bit about
this is complicated. Thank you. It's a very good question. I mentioned consensus often today, and just as you, I'm very wary. I'm uncomfortable with the ideal of a perfect society where people would agree on the fact that climate change is the priority and therefore we should stop digging and all these things. Even if that's what I want in terms of content, I would be wary of that. Now, I finished the talk with what was in fact my premise, which is that let's assume we live in mental hospitals. And it's clear when you know that you live in a mental hospital that there's no consensus, because some people think they're Napoleon. And it's hard to reach a consensus with somebody who thinks he's Napoleon. So that's not the issue. The issue is who cleans the dishes.
Yes. Infrastructure.
Or practical things. And I think very often in the disagreement, the political disagreement we have, and the fact that certain political parties manage to have a few abstract problems, which are not only abstract problems, but for a lot of us, they are abstract problems, like crime, like drugs, like this. I mean, maybe a lot of us have problem with drugs in different forms. But maybe when it's our problem, or neighbor, or son's problem, maybe we don't know what to do with it and it ends up in a tragedy, but at least we try to do something. And maybe we fail, sometimes, often we manage to. When it's just on television, there's a drug problem in France, well, okay, now what do I do? So there can be easily a consensus saying, we should put all the traffickers in jail. Okay, good idea, so there wouldn't be any drug if there's no traffickers. Well, it's not that easy, because it's easy abstractly, but it's not implementable. So when I say consensus, I don't mean everybody should see the same way and think the same, but again, who cleans the bathroom? Just who cleans? And why should it be always the same person, especially in France? And in France, it's so unbearable because you have all these laws preventing women of Muslim origin, for instance, to teach in the school, because if you keep your veil, you cannot teach in a school. Okay, first, I think it's outrageous, but okay. But then, in my university, in all universities in France, you come at 6 o'clock in the morning and you have mostly veiled women cleaning our bathrooms. So, just cleaning the bathroom is important. Who does it? What does it say about what our society is? And maybe let's start from that. And maybe I think we can reach agreements from that. And I think if we start,
start from what we actually do.
Yeah, what we can do. I can stand up.
Yes.
I can clean the bathroom.
Yes.
I don't. You should say I'm highly hypocritical because you know who you're paying to clean the bathroom and it's not me. But that could change. Again, it wouldn't be easy. Maybe people wouldn't come so often to your museum if they had to clean the bathroom. But maybe not. Maybe it would be great. I mean, maybe people would come here just for that, because that would be different. Maybe that would be an opening to some different form of, again, equality, freedom, liberty, and all that.
More questions? There, one.
It goes a bit with what you just said about this idea of caring for each other and the responsibility we have with each other. And so also trying to clarify the last part of your the first part, what you said, when you talked about the ambience and all that. This idea of attention deficit, and not in a clinical way, but in a sense of lacking of the attention for the others and the world. Do you think that this lack of caring enables these infrastructures, or is the other way? There's infrastructures of power who are profiting of our lack of care.
Wow. That's a hard one. I don't know if I can answer that in a satisfactory manner. I would say no. So I state my inability on this, but maybe I can turn around. I can circumvent the question, and maybe we need more time to discuss about it later on. I want to see. And again, I'm speaking from a French perspective. I don't know how much the word care has been trendy or untrendy in Portugal over the last 20 years. I know in France, with my little journal you mentioned, we have a journal called Multitude. We were among the first ones in France with a colleague, co-director of Multitude, called Sandra Logier. She's a philosopher in France. And she's one of the first ones who was really interested in these theories coming mostly from the English-speaking world and translating and making it a political issue, et cetera, et cetera. So, but at the beginning, I mean, we were crazy people to talk about this, another import from the US, et cetera. And now it's becoming quite common.
Here.
Same thing here?
There's also in the academy, there is also the care studies.
Okay, good. And I think it's I think it's very important. And it's precisely, you were absolutely right, it's linked to this notion of ambiance, of atmosphere, of creating a shared space where people are not just exploited, are not just oppressed, but we worry it's a matter of responsibility. We want to respond to their suffering, or we want to respond to their need, and we expect them to respond to our needs, et cetera, et cetera. So the link between this caring attitude, I would call it, and then caring work. And that's one of the big things that Sandra Logier insisted upon, is to say, care is not just about attention. I pay attention to what you're doing, and I think it's terrible what you're living. At least you know this. But no, care is work. And it happens to be mostly women who do this type of work. Very often, as I was saying, women of immigrant tradition or immigrant origin to do this. So there's a social, political aspect of care as a practice, as work. Now, I think if all this is advancing, evolving in our society, I think we could say it's partly due to a change in the way we consider the structures. I don't know if it's infrastructures. And I would say here, maybe the structures of power in terms of potestas, in terms of poder, not just the potentiality, but the poder. And I see this as something that should be considered very encouraging in our age. I think we don't have many reasons to think that there's something good in our period. There's something, I don't know if we should be proud of, but there's been progress. I think now we see history as just going down, down, down. Everything's going to burn, and it's all going to end up in wars, and we're responsible for it, and it's the end of the world. I think it's partly true, but also a lot of things have developed in terms of recognition of the oppression of men against women. And this dates back centuries, but I think now, even with Me Too, even if it has problems, etc., it's increasing. And I think this caring about care, I think this is a symptom of our relation to power, really the infrastructure of power, but this time of potestas, is being altered, is changing. And the fact that just because you're on top of the ladder, you can do anything to the person under you. I think this was not always, not totally the case, but much more the case 50 years ago than now. So the fact that women react in a certain way in how men talk to them in the working place, the fact that certain type of jokes, certain type of things are considered unacceptable because they hurt, this is all a result of care as an attitude. And I would say that either it erodes a certain oppressivity of the infrastructures of power, it raises our attention to this ambiance thing that I was referring to very vaguely earlier. And this is progress. Now, this progress, I think, is very fragile. And that's why when the Invisible Committee says, oh, the political is infrastructural, I think this progress is in part made possible by maybe certain easiness of life. Maybe we can ask this question and we're not under such duress, under such pressure, under such desperation that we can pay attention to other people's feelings and so forth. I am lucky enough not to have ever been involved in a war. And I don't know what it is now to be in Ukraine and fighting. I can see two very different things. Either it is just so hard and it is just so inhumane that you become inhumane yourself. You just shoot, you survive, you don't care, oh, did I hurt? I don't care, I just got to survive. And that's one of my fantasy about what it is like to be a war. But I think that a lot of people tell us, well, no, you care a lot about the guy behind you. Not only because you know he can save you and so forth, but pressure, duress, brings a form of solidarity, that it's care in terms of solidarity, that it's much stronger. And so I think one of the ways to see a possible future that would be very worrying is to say, well, as this easiness diminishes, maybe we'll realize that we'll realize better that we are dependent on the other. And this solidarity will come to the front as certain individualizing easiness brought by the infrastructure, brought by these facilities, decrease. So that would be maybe one way to associate infrastructure and care, but I'm not sure it makes sense. I would be curious to see how you see it. Yeah.
We have time for a last question. I hope, yes.
Hi, thank you, Yves. Thank you, Yves, and thank you, Liliana. I've been feeling less and less as a citizen, and I was wondering if this is a collective feeling of a certain cognitive dissonance of not being a citizen anymore. And I think the question relates to the previous one about care, because I think citizenship is mostly about care. It used to be about respect, for example, but it turned into a broader concept. But I would like to know, Dr. Yves, if there's a cure for this, and are we all doomed? That's my question.
Thanks for the humor. Thank you very much. I don't know. So doctor doesn't know. Don't trust doctors. I love the question, and I would start by evading it, but then I'll go back to it. I never use the word citizen, citoyen, in French, because, and this may be very much due to the French context, the notion of citoyen is very strongly associated with the nation state. First, I don't have a French passport, so I'm not a citoyen. But I'm white and I fit in and so forth. But I see so many people who don't have the typical skin color of the French citoyen, who don't have the papers, who don't have the thing. And just to say citoyen, to me, it's exclusive. So I never use that word because it's linked to the nation state. But etymologically, it's linked to the city. Citoyen, city, civitas. And therefore, there, I subscribe 50 times. And I think this type of citoyenneté, it would be in France, in the three words, égalité, liberté, fraternité. Would be, we're talking about solidarity and care, etc., etc. I see that citoyenneté, my neighbor. It's just my neighbor. People who live in the same city who precisely have to clean their dishes, clean their bathroom, take care of the mess we leave in the street, rebuild the church if the church is going to fall, etc., etc. So this citoyenneté there of in cohabiting in a shared space, if this is citoyenneté and not the passport that you have or you don't have, then that's care, that's crucial, that's exactly what I was talking about. Just citoyenneté, cohabiting in a shared space with functions that we have to take over together, with maybe this is the difference, which is that I think, but that's not true of the Roman world, I guess, but at least in the modern imaginary, because citoyenneté is linked with the nation state, I think we have still this idea that we're homogeneous. And maybe, again, maybe this is much stronger in France. In France, you know, maybe the presupposition on foreigner is that they will assimilate. I don't know if you have that in Portugal. Assimilation. So you have to become French. Yes. Maybe you were born. Okay, it's not a crime to be born somewhere else. We need you, so we allow you to come. But you have to assimilate. And some people, like Muslim people, they don't assimilate, etc., etc. So this assimilation, if it's built in the notion of citoyenneté, again, it's not stupid to say that you have to share a number of practical rules. If you come here and you burn your house, and it's my house also, then it's not good. Then you don't assimilate, and then I don't want you. Yeah. That's true. But it's not, if it was just that, it would be cool, but it's much more than that. That's why I don't take it. But if you say, we start from heterogeneity. That's why I was talking about the mental asylum. We know that some people think they're Napoleon, and we know that some people are Marxist, and that some people are religious people. And we don't want to assimilate them all to one thing. So, and they seem crazy. Mm-hmm. Certain things seem crazy. But how do we reach consensus on how to cohabitate? Which means, again, that am I a citoyen? Am I assimilated? Am I crazy? Am I insane? Am I racist? Am I sexist? Maybe a little bit, and maybe I should try to
create the conditions also for this co-living.
That's what we're doing with some friends. We call it infrastructure. We call it multi-perspectivist mental infrastructures. It's too complicated. Just forget it. We have to find something better. But that's just if you unfold it, multi-perspectivist infrastructure, which is both media infrastructure, it goes through dialogue, ambience, and all these things, but it's mental. It's also, it goes from the outside and the inside.
Yes. So we need to close here in order to do a small break and then move to another conversation. Thank you very much.
Thank you for the talk, for the invitation.
Thanks.
Thank you for coming.